Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the Senior Director Event Programming at MediaPost, and this is Brand Insider BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers today. And with me is Jaclyn Cardin. She is the Chief Brand Officer and CMO of Organic Valley. Welcome, Jaclyn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so glad that you can do this. And I know that you were going to come to one of our summits. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out, but we're still going to get that going. But in
Yeah.
the meantime, as I always do my snooping and found out you just have had such an amazing career. I wanted you to share it with me. So I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So, well, I first have to say, I know that a couple of years back, a few years back, you got the Gen Next Award, and that was for digital transformation, which obviously marketing, it's all about transformation, and this is something that marketers need to embrace. But for you personally, because there's also transformation in our lives, and it could be
Yeah.
career related or it could be personal, career is personal, but in other whatever, it could be in any aspect. So what to you is transformation? And has there been a time in your life where you sort of had that kind of moment in your life where you had to transform, and what was it about and how did you handle all of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in my life it's always transforming. I think transformation to me is, how we continue to change and grow in all aspects of our lives. So our beliefs and our values and our experiences and the lives that we lead. I'm not one that stays like comfortable or stagnant for very long.
Mhm.
And I do love change for the most part. And not all change, is fun or, even good. But I think embracing a growth mindset and always being willing and excited about constant learning, constant transformation, seeing what's coming down the pipe, seeing how that can be leveraged, whether it's for work or for personal life, and continuing to stay as modern as possible um, has served me well. And I think that's what I would say is transformation. I was kind of thinking about, transformation and evolution. And for me, I don't always often know if I'm in a transformation until I look back. It's kind of like someone explained to me once that, if you're looking up at the night sky and you see a bunch of stars and you step back and you can see the constellation, and I think that is so true in my life. Is there's moments where it feels significant, but it's not until sometimes I get through the moment and I can look back and go, oh wow, that was bigger than just one star, right? Or there was more connection points there. And to me, that's transformation. I have almost never like set out to like transform, so to speak. It's just sort of one of those things where when opportunities arise, I tend to jump at them and not talk myself out of, or overthink the million things that could go wrong. I like to think about, what can I learn from this? What could go right? What value could be added to my life? So when I think about it, whether again, be at work and right now, like the moment I heard about, like AI and chat GPT, I was like probably one of the first people to sign up in our company, because I get excited by it and I want to understand, what is the tool? How could we leverage it? How could it, potentially be something more, not only just for work, but in my own life too. And so I think that's just my mindset.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I love that because I do think, and I think as a marketer, it kind of has to be, but I think there are obviously, it sounds like yours is more, on this level as opposed to maybe, there's all different levels in terms of how much people want to continue to change and try new things and do new things. But I'm not going to let you get past that. I want to hear something in your past when you looked at all the stars, when you
Yeah.
look back. Was there a time when you're like, wow, and then like, and what was it? What was that time when maybe it was scary at the time? Maybe that was your initial instinct initially, or maybe it was gung ho. But is there a specific time you can mention?
Yeah, I think early on in college, I thought I was going to be a journalist and be, my dream was to be a news anchor. And I decided to study abroad, and I went to London for 6 months, and it was while I was over there that, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, like 10,000 people. And again, didn't really think much of it. I just always wanted to go to Europe and thought it would be interesting to try something new. And so I, enrolled myself in the program and found myself in the middle of London, not knowing a single person or what I was doing. I'd really never taken public transportation. And that was a huge moment. And not only just, learning how to be independent and resourceful and figuring all that out, but also it was then that I decided, wow, I don't think that's actually what I want to do with my life. And it was really kind of this, I was not expecting that at the time. I was, anchoring my college news station and really involved with like general management in that station and kind of all in. But it wasn't until I got outside of the US and kind of like looked at how other countries kind of think about the US that it just changed my perspective. So much so that I'd actually changed what I wanted to do with my career. So that was a really big one. And that was years ago. I think in more recent times, I have had a lot of these. I moved to New York back in 2014 for a job, and that was huge. And, kind of similar to the London, I didn't really, I had this opportunity. I'd been working from home for a couple of years for a hair care company called Diva Curl.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time that I'd worked for them, it went from being completely founder owned to private equity owned, a piece of it. And at that point, they decided to build an office in Soho. And we had a new president come in, and he asked me, hey, would you want to move out to New York and help us launch our digital channel and our direct to consumer brand and lead up all of that? And it was just such a great opportunity. So I said yes. And, at what, wasn't ever expecting to live in New York, quickly learned that a lot of people that move to that city, it is their dream to live there. And it is something that, people fight to do. And it was never even on my radar. So I got there, and it was, again, one of those moments like, what have I done? I moved there with my dog, just the two of us. And it was really a lot to navigate at first. And then working there was really interesting. But the transformation there for me was really seeing what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I hadn't put myself to that type of test before. And there were moments of that which were totally exhausting. And, I was learning a lot on the fly as I was also building a team and building really a whole digital infrastructure from basically scratch. But it was just a huge growthful number of years for me there. And something that allowed me to understand that if I put my mind to it, like truly anything is possible.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, I love that you went with your dog. I I got my dog when I was living in New York, and I think everyone always says, "Oh, you can't have a dog in a city." New York made it the easiest to have
Oh
a
yeah.
dog. With the dog parks and the Central Park and all the, you meet other dogs, so they become very sociable. Anyway, I just that was my take on that whole thing. No, just kidding. No, and I do think that that's like, when you go somewhere and you don't know what to expect. I mean, you did it, you had done it before when when you moved to Europe, and then obviously then or London. Did you moved to London for your job?
Mhm.
Yeah. And then for going to New York, but just going somewhere, I think there's an excitement to being like, I don't know anyone, and it forces you to then meet more people and try new things. It almost makes you much more open to everything than when you have your group. I don't,
Mhm.
do you feel that way?
Totally. I mean, it's like all the safety nets are gone. And even if they're not, they feel like it in that moment. It's kind of like this sense of like adventure, right? It's like, oh, well, if you want to try new foods or, walking to work versus driving a car or, different types of routines, like everything's new. And
Hmm.
so it's just sort of this moment to shed what is no longer serving you, or in my case, that's kind of how I looked at it, is like, okay, this for the next however long I'm here, this is just a moment for me to try on something new. And keep what's working in my life and get rid of what's not. And that has served me well.
Saying I think it can be really freeing. And I think that I would recommend it's not about staying where you'd go do differently or whatever it is, but doing something completely on your own, out of your comfort zone, to do it at least once in your lifetime or more. I just think you gain so much out of it.
Yeah. You do. And for me, it's also this what has was so eye-opening to me, in college and again in New York, and I've traveled a ton for my job, is just it made me a more empathetic person. It made me it broadened my perspective so much on there's a lot of different ways to live and there's no one right way to do it. And there's so many different attractive ways to, spend time and make connections and, use your time for good in the world. And being able to get outside of where I am from and see so many different people and backgrounds and cultures. And it just, it has made me a well-rounded,
Mhm.
more well-rounded person. And that is the one thing, when people have asked me in my life, what is one piece of advice you have or what have you, and it is travel. I mean, I think that is one of the and not travel. I mean, you can travel and go to an all-inclusive resort, but it kind of doesn't count. Like get out and like experience culture and put
Yep.
yourself out there a little bit and meet people and figure out how to talk to strangers and navigate yourself around a city where you can't even read the signs, you don't speak the language. Like to me that has just been the biggest gift of all, is getting myself out of my comfort zone and recognizing that just because I have one way that I like to do things does not mean that that is the only way.
Right. Yeah, and it's not about even changing your way. Like it's about just experiencing things.
Yeah.
Sometimes you maybe adapt what you come across. Sometimes you just take it in, but it's just having those experiences. I completely agree. So obviously, when you first were starting out, when you first graduating, you had aspirations to be a journalist, and that changed. And you've been in different types of position. You worked on the agency side, brand side. You mentioned Diva Curl, but talk about your path in terms of from where you started and how it brought you to where you are today. So I'm just starting out, or maybe I'm wanting a career change and I'm looking to be you. So, what type of advice would you give that person?
I think just being really accepting of where you are in your journey. Number one, I think it's easy to look at what everybody else is doing and say that's what I want to do or this is what I want to do. And what was the driving force for me is that I never had a dream to be a CMO. I really didn't. I never had a dream to lead marketing. What I've always had a dream to do is have a fulfilling career and change the world. Like that is what I've always wanted to do since I was a kid, is just what can I do to make the biggest impact that I can possibly make. And I think about that all the time, not just with my career, but with other choices that I make in life. And so I think it's like figuring out what makes you tick. And if you have that, honest kind of self introspection and it's that you want to be a chief marketing officer, then my recommendation would be to surround yourself with as many people as possible that are going to help you get there and get outside of your comfort zone. Like I ask for feedback all the time. I try to ask for feedback far more than I give feedback. You know, take as many opportunities as I can. I decided last year after I was promoted into this position that, I could really benefit from some formal training. And so I started doing some research, found that Kellogg had a CMO program, got really into that and kind of studying up and seeing what this was all about. It's a year-long program. What was I going to learn? And then decided to go for it. And that was all self-driven. Nobody asked me to do that. That was not like a carrot, kind of dangling out there for me. It was, if I'm going to take on this role and I want to make the biggest impact that I possibly can and help these farmers that we represent, sustain growth for decades to come, how do I put myself in the best position possible to do that? And so for me, it was, let me get a bunch of feedback from people who have reported to me what's going well, where do I have gaps, where should I improve, figuring out, from my perspective, what I'm going to need to be able to feel confident as a leader and continuing to sharpen as a modern marketer. And so I think that's all it takes, is figuring out where are you today? Where do
Mhm.
you want to go? And then being really willing to be vulnerable and ask a lot of questions, ask for honest feedback, and then push yourself to surround yourself with the information, the people, the relationships that you need to be able to get there. Not in my life, none of it's come easy. And, I've had to really navigate my own path. I haven't had because I haven't had a clear, like this is my goal. There's some people who report to me that can tell me exactly where they want to be in 5 years, and there's some people who can't. And there's no one right or wrong way to do it. But because I've never had that, like, hey, I want to be, a CMO in 5 years, it's made my development conversations different with my boss. And I think in some ways it's been better for me because I've really been in charge of my own development, and I've had tons of great mentors and great bosses that have supported me in that. But
Mhm.
I've had to be a little bit more inventive about my career path. So if that sounds like don't, I would say, don't beat yourself up that you don't know where you want to be in 5 years. I think a lot of people are in that boat. But if you can find out what makes you tick and then start to line those steps in, okay, if that's what I generally want to be doing, then how would I get there? And then actually start doing the hard work of, closing gaps, building relationships, increasing skills, whatever you got to do to be able to get there.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, yes, you can have that 5-year plan. Some people have a 10-year plan. There's nothing wrong with that. And that can be very helpful. But I also think, and from what it sounds like with what you found opportunities, it gave you chances. Like, you took what you have and you were going with it. But then you said, like you said, what makes you tick, but also maybe this is the way to go. Or maybe, like, I think you find these steps along the way. And sometimes maybe you miss those really important steps because you're looking
So,
too far in the future. I
mhm.
don't know. So I think that at least that's benefited you, it sounds like.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah. So, well, talk about, I mean, you mentioned, your career path and sort of how you approach things, but is there something people get wrong about you? Like, when they first meet you?
I'm a challenger. I challenge myself, I challenge my wife, I challenge my coworkers. Like, I typically don't accept things at face value often. Like, I like to understand them and ask questions. I'm a super curious person by nature. I always have been. And, just because this is the way maybe we've always done it, is it really the best way? Or, could we think about it this way? And I think sometimes, and I've had to work on this a lot in my own career, and it's a constant, is people look at that and it can be intimidating sometimes, or people have thought maybe, I don't want to hear, a counterpoint, or that I'm just going to, challenge. Like, people sometimes would think maybe I wasn't listening to them, but that it's actually just like, if someone says, no, here's the reasons why that I think it's this, it's like there's very often, and the people that report to me will tell you, where it's like, oh yeah, I totally see that now. So it's like sometimes I'm just asking questions, and for certain folks, and especially earlier on in my career, and earlier on in places of employment that where people don't know me well, they I've watched people kind of like back down, like, oh, well, if you want to do it that way. And I'm like, no, challenge me back.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's something that I've really watched, because, in at different levels, that has been reacted to differently. Like, if when I was, more a manager and a director, and I had a smaller scope, it was easier to be more of that challenger, because I worked with those people every day and I was in the weeds, and they knew me as well as I knew them. And what I've realized is, as I've grown and my influence has then grown in the organization, oftentimes I'm talking to people that don't know me at all. And so being able to really lead with, hey, I this is how I'm thinking about it. I would love to hear how you're thinking about it, and invite more of a dialogue, because I do think that can be a misconception for a lot of leaders, is just because a leader has strong convictions, or wants to challenge, that they're not welcoming, someone to come and actually challenge back and challenge the status quo. And that's something that's I find to be super attractive in anyone working in a office environment, is to be, willing to actually have those challenges and offer those counterpoints.
Well, I think, and it's just about being open-minded, and it's maybe some of them you're not going to agree with and some you will, but I think I can understand, especially someone in your position, that if there's someone who's, the manager, or just, starting out, maybe they don't want to challenge you, as you say, and so I think now that you're, sort of adding, like, okay, go ahead, it's all right. That's a great way to be able to work with your staff, at this point, especially.
Yeah, agreed.
So, all right. So I want to organic Valley, obviously, and you guys are all about sustainability and ethically produced food. And one of your, I want to read it correctly, helping, this is one of Organic Valley's taglines, or helping to contribute to a better world. So what I want to ask you is, which I think is wonderful, that's obviously awesome, and we all need that. But what contributes to your better world? So we're not talking Organic Valley, and we're not even talking what Organic Valley does in terms of sustainability or any of that. I want to go outside of that. And what makes your world better?
For me, it's trying to stay as present as possible. And like I was talking about earlier, on a macro scale, I've always had this ambition to do everything that I can to make a positive impact on the world. And, some days that goes so much better than others. Some days, we're just trying to get it done without like losing our minds. And other days, it feels like you're really moving the needle. But for me, small things. What I used to think about, big things all the time, and that could overwhelm me. Like, how
Mhm.
do I, fix really big problems or like the really hairy systemic problems? And what I've learned is for me, and, obviously all of us are really busy and, have really busy careers and life outside of work, is how do I start stacking up the little things to make a really big difference? So one thing that I value a lot is small businesses and having a thriving community where I live, whether that be when I lived in New York City. I think maybe that was part of it for me, was living there and seeing all these small businesses and people trying to make something go and
Yeah.
putting everything they had, like their whole life savings, into opening up a restaurant or opening up a new shop or launching a new brand or whatever the case may be. And then moving here and truly working for Organic Valley and seeing, small family farmers and small producers trying to make it go. And I just learned, wow, like I have so much power in just how I shop. And so
Right.
like little things to me make an impact, like shopping local and truly doing that. And like this year, with the holidays, and last year I did the same thing, like trying to buy as many things as possible in my own local community and from small producers or from small makers, or going to some of these, like makers fairs and things and seeing what's out there. Like not only does that fill my bucket, but I do believe it contributes to a thriving community to have these small producers doing well.
Hmm.
um, I also always try to buy the highest quality that I can. And sustainability isn't just an important value for Organic Valley. It's one of the reasons I'm here. Is that's a really important personal value for me. Is I don't have children myself, but always worry about the next generation. That's like a thing that keeps me up at night, is like, what does this world look like in 80 years? And what can I do today to make sure that some of the things that I value so deeply are still around 80 years from now? And so, focusing on organic and focusing on just really thinking about how the dollars I spend contribute to that world 80 years from now that I worry about, helps me feel like I'm making a big impact. So I might not have all the time to, do all of the volunteering that I want to do, but there are certainly like a lot of small things that I do every single day that put me on that path to really living my values and making an impact. And then I like to dream about, someday when life slows down, being able to actually go volunteer for these
Right.
organizations that right now I might just donate to, because sometimes time is my scarcest resource.
Yeah. Well, but I love that you say that, in the sense, I think a lot of people want to do more. They want to do something better. And it becomes where it's overwhelming, like you saying earlier, like if it's this big picture, like, okay, I'm going to volunteer 5 days or, a month or whatever, doing this or whatever it may be. And, but I think saying just those little steps, whatever those little steps are, and, you talked about what you're doing, other people maybe have other steps, but finding what you want to do and to make the world better, like let's talk with that type of thing, the sustainability, because I do think that is something that we are hearing more about. But for a lot of people, maybe it's lip service, and I don't mean it always negatively either. I mean it like they maybe genuinely mean they want to do something different, but then they don't know how, or they get overwhelmed, but it's too big of a deal. So I think that's good advice, like just to kind of find those little steps, the baby steps that can maybe eventually grow.
Yeah.
It all makes a difference.
It's like when you know better, you do better. And I've always really loved that quote. And it's, for me, that's been the journey. I didn't grow up in a household that, bought organic or always promoted local, or, that wasn't necessarily my upbringing. but it's something I've learned along the way. And it wasn't because I, went on a retreat for a month and learned all about this. It's been just this journey of, okay, learning about these brands. And then once you learn a little bit more, then you learn more and you just start building this foundation of knowledge. And that has served me really well. It's to not let things get too big. And then it's like you throw your up in the air because it's like, I can't save the world here. But it's like, actually, you can make a huge impact just by really being thoughtful about how you spend your time and money every single day. Like a few bucks and 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference over a lifetime.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I love, again, back with the dog thing. I always love anything involving that. And as you said, you are a dog mom. And so I think it's great. You and your partner started a doggy treat company. And let's see, it's called Wuffies, right? It's founded,
Woofy,
what is it?
woofy,
Woofy, Woofy,
woofy.
Woofy. Okay, Woof, Woof, Woofy. Wuffy. And but so you make human grade dog treats, and it's all handmade. So I think that's awesome. I love that. But I want to ask you, so obviously some of the dog treats, Wuffy pies, pumpkin peanut butter. Well, what's your dog treat? What's your human treat that you go to?
Ooh, I have so many. I think, well, like summertime, there's this amazing ice cream shop in the town that I live in. I live in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and it's called The Pearl, and it's been around for a long, long time. And it's like an old fashioned candy and ice cream shop, and their ice cream is like out of this world. And they
Mhm.
make their own waffle cones that you can smell from outside. And so that is my go-to treat in the summer, and frankly I go there in the winter too, but like ice cream on a hot day is hard to beat.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Anything that's maybe a guilty pleasure, not necessarily a food. It can be what might be your guilty pleasure. Maybe it's, streaming a ton of, reality shows, or, doing, or having your wine and ice cream or cheese, or I don't know, whatever it may be, where you kind of say, this is, you're kind of a little guilty about, but it's a good thing.
Well, we have a favorite restaurant in town that we go to way too often. My wife and I shame ourselves for it all the time, but we still do it. So that's a guilty, we love good food. And we do like to go out and enjoy food as much as possible. So that's a guilty pleasure. I actually love spa days, and some people may say that's not a guilty pleasure, that's self-care, but for me, it might actually be more of a guilty pleasure because I have learned how to work that into my schedule pretty regularly, and that's been really nice. But just like on a day-to-day basis, I really love just like binge watching HGTV. I can get lost in that for like a whole Sunday afternoon.
Do you are you handy around the house, or is this just you, and watch it but not necessarily do it?
I am handy around the house. Yeah, and in the garden. We really love to have a comfortable, kind of inviting, eclectic place to live. And so I'm just very like intrigued by how people live and designs and how people want their house to reflect their values and the way they live. And, I especially love like House Hunters International, where people are like picking up and moving across the world. Like to
Mhm.
me, by the time I'm, older, I would love to do that too, is live abroad again.
Yep.
And so I'm just like inspired by people going for it, whether it's like renovating their own homes or moving across the world or whatever the case may be. It's interesting to me.
Well, you said you love seeing how people's homes reflect them, or how they bring out
Yeah.
that. So how does your home? What's the number one thing that really reflects you and your wife?
Everyone that walks into our
Maybe
house.
it's you.
Yeah, no, everyone that walks into her house always says it's so warm and cozy here. And that's what I want for people, is when they come over to feel like it's a place to just hang out and feel comfortable and feel like they live there. Um we have a lot of, friends and family, and we don't have children ourselves. And so it's funny, it's like anybody that needs a weekend away from their kids likes to come down and stay with us for a weekend. And that's really fun. But it's important to us that when somebody's staying with us or just visiting, that they feel really welcome and
Mhm.
really comfortable in our space.
Yeah, and they don't have the kids come in and you're like, "Get off the couch," or
I know, we're always like, "No, bring the kids, we'd love to see the kids." They're like, "No."
"We wanna just come for have a spa ready for us. We'll do a little scampering at the spa day at your house."
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, talking about that, I mean, I'm sure that this going to the spa helps refuel you, but is there anything else? What do you turn to when it's just one of those days you leave work and it's like, ugh, like you just need something to just get you going again?
Yeah. I've really had to learn this because I am the type of person that will just go until there's nothing left. And I've burnt myself out many times already in my career where it's just like I I don't always know when to stop. And so that's been one of my biggest lessons is trying not to let myself get to that point. So a while ago I started getting up really early in the morning. Like usually I'm up, 4:30, maybe 5 o'clock, and that's my time.
Wow.
And that the quiet hours of the morning has really been the fuel I've needed to stay balanced and just grounded and connected to my own goals. And it's kind of the sacred time I have that nobody will really interrupt. I rarely am getting, a phone call at 5:30 in the morning. And so for me, it's that time to, meditate and read and exercise and just kind of sit and think about how I want the day to go, or if I know I have a big week coming up, or a big presentation, or whatever the case may be, to start to think about how I want that to go. What do I have to line up in order to get there? That is my fuel for sure. It's not anyone, I got to go on vacation every 3 months. I mean, that's nice, but it's really this consistency of making sure I'm filling my own bucket that has been a big unlock for me.
Yeah, you're not the first to say that, and every time I'm like, keep saying I want to do that. Like I'm
Yeah.
so not a morning person. I'm much more nighttime. I get completely like I want to do stuff. I start like, let me exercise. It's 9 p.m. That kind of thing. But I want to because I think it would be amazing one to get my exercise done, my workout done before the day starts, but also just as you describe it, and as other women executives I've talked with, do they have the same kind of feeling with that? And I think it's like amazing. And I would love to be able to do that. But were you always a you shook your head no. So I'm assuming not. So how did you make that happen?
It's because I love it so much, to be honest. Like I thought that sounded awful. And I remember, early on, and it was still when I was living in New York and life was so crazy busy and we were doing big things and, growing really fast. And it was like I couldn't find enough hours in the day for myself. And I started doing some research and I read this book and it's called Miracle Morning. And the philosophy was basically around, there's a certain number of things that you should do every single day to fill your bucket. And so I was like, just try this. And so one of the things in there was, I think it was like, get up at 5 a.m. every day and don't hit the snooze button, like whatever you got to do. And I was like notorious for hitting the snooze button,
Me
like
too.
kind of an embarrassing amount, to be honest. Like I could hit it for like a full hour. And so I was like, not hit the snooze. This is radical. And so I tried it and I loved it. And I felt so much better after a month. I was like, let me just try it for a month. And so I tried it for a month. And the idea there, I think they called it savers. It was like sit in silence, like basically meditate, do affirmations, kind of visualize your future, exercise, read, and write. And so I did that for a month and I was like, wow. And I did not, all of that was outside of my comfort zone for the most part, or most of it. It was like, what am I doing here? But it's like, in the middle of the morning, early in the morning, it's like a time to experiment. And so that started to feel great. And then from there, I've really adapted it and kind of taken what's worked for me and adopted that into my life. But um, I felt so much better, like almost immediately. And after a month, it was just like, wow, there's really something to this. And there has been times in the years since I started doing it that I'll get off track, like even months at a time where I'm not as consistent with it. And I can immediately tell, like, I'm depleted again. What am I doing? And I get myself back on track. And so in the mornings and it's like a daily battle still after all these years, when the alarm goes off, it's the last thing I want to do, especially in the cold winter. Like I just want to stay in a warm, cozy bed and it's dark. And the last thing I want to do is get up and exercise, trust me. But it feels so good. And I just try to remind myself of that every morning when the alarm goes off is, man, 3 hours from now, I am going to be so happy I got up. And if I don't, I'm going to be super bummed and disappointed that I didn't do this for myself. So
Yeah.
that has helped. It's just, getting kind of addicted to the feeling of self-care and the feeling that I have after I've taken good care of myself. I've learned that it's just super important, and listening to like my mentors too, and coaches that I have, it's just it really is important. And everyone's got so much stress. It's just part of the world that we live in. And so unless we proactively make some changes, um life can be pretty tough. And so this is the way for me that I can keep things in balance a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think that's was a key thing what you said. You just said a month. And again, sort of going back to what we were talking about earlier, set like these smaller kind of
Yeah.
goals or steps as opposed to then you're not overwhelmed with, all right, now I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning. And then, yeah, no, covers go back over the head. But if you think about it in terms of just for the week or just for the month. So I do think that's really good advice. Well, Jaclyn, thank you so much. This has
Yeah.
been great. I love getting to know you and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for watching. And as I always say, if you know a amazing woman like Jaclyn and you'd love for me to sort of pull back the curtain on them, please let me know, recommend, and I will do my best. So thanks for watching. And again, Jaclyn, thank you.
Thank you.